It was an autumn afternoon when the young Miller family arrived in the small town of Ashwood. James, a university professor with a passion for history, had always dreamed of living in an old house filled with stories and secrets. Finding a Victorian mansion for sale at a surprisingly low price, he didn't hesitate. The house, located on Elm Street, was imposing, with its well-preserved Victorian facade, but at the same time, it exuded a sense of desolation and abandonment. Ashwood had a long history, dating back to colonial times. Founded in the early 18th century, the town had been an important trading post and had witnessed various battles and significant events over the years. The mansion, built in 1892 by the influential industrialist Harold Whitmore, was a symbol of the era's prosperity. However, the house's history was marked by tragedies and unexplained events. Shortly after its construction, Harold's wife, Margaret, was found dead under mysterious circumstances. Rumors in town suggested she had been the victim of a dark ritual, but nothing was proven. Years later, during a grand party, Harold's son disappeared without a trace. These events marked the beginning of the mansion's bad reputation. Over the years, the house was sold and resold numerous times. None of the owners managed to live there for long. There were reports of nighttime whispers, heavy footsteps echoing through empty corridors, and shadows that seemed to come to life. Some said the house was cursed, while others believed it was a portal to another dimension. James, his wife Emily, and their daughter Lily were aware of the stories but dismissed them as exaggerated urban legends. They saw the house as an opportunity to start a new life in a place with unique charm and character. Little did they know, they were about to dive into a nightmare that would challenge their understanding of reality. The house, with its thick walls and tall windows, seemed to watch the family as they unloaded their belongings. A cool breeze swept through the garden, like a whisper of welcome. The town's older residents watched from a distance, with expressions of concern and curiosity. To them, the arrival of a new family at the mansion was an event laden with ominous portents. The first night in the house was eerily silent. The Miller family settled into the spacious rooms, enchanted by the architecture and old details that seemed to tell stories of a bygone era. However, the feeling that something was off was palpable, as if the house itself was waiting for the right moment to reveal its darkest secrets. And so, with a mix of excitement and unease, the Miller family's stay in Ashwood's most haunted house began. A stay that would change their lives forever. James Miller was a middle-aged man with a burning passion for history and architecture. As a university professor, he spent hours studying local history and its connections to the past. With dark hair and a well-trimmed beard, James had a look that conveyed both curiosity and determination. His vision was to transform the old Victorian mansion into a modern home while maintaining its historic charm. Emily, his wife, was an exceptionally talented artist. She saw beauty in everything, even in things others considered ordinary. With her long brown hair and piercing green eyes, Emily had a serene and welcoming presence. She was eager to turn the mansion into a living gallery of her art, using the old walls as a canvas for her creations. Lily, the couple's daughter, was an 8-year-old girl with a fertile imagination and an adventurous spirit. With wavy blonde hair and bright blue eyes, Lily loved to explore and discover new places. She was enchanted by the idea of living in such a large old house, full of secret rooms and hidden corners. Lily had an invisible friend since she was little, something James and Emily thought was just a product of her active imagination. Shortly after moving in, James and Emily met Mr. Thompson, a respected local historian. Mr. Thompson was an elderly man with an air of wisdom and mystery. His white hair and reading glasses gave him the appearance of someone who had spent a lifetime immersed in old books and documents. He was known in the town for his deep knowledge of local history and his investigations into unexplained phenomena. Upon learning that the Miller family had moved into the mansion, Mr. Thompson offered to share everything he knew about the house's dark history. He believed that to understand the present, it was essential to know the past. James and Emily gratefully accepted his offer, eager to learn more about their new home. As James delved into the old documents and records provided by Mr. Thompson, Emily began decorating the house with her artworks, trying to bring warmth and life to the environment. Lily, in turn, spent her days exploring every corner of the mansion, enchanted by the old rooms and labyrinthine corridors. The family dynamics were harmonious, with James and Emily supporting each other in their passions and caring for Lily with affection. They were determined to turn the mansion into a home full of love and joy, unaware of the dark secrets it concealed. Mr. Thompson became a frequent visitor, bringing new documents and sharing stories of unexplained events related to the house. His presence became a comfort to the family, especially as the first signs of strangeness began to manifest. He became not just a friend but an essential figure in the struggle to understand and confront the mysteries surrounding the mansion. The presence of these central characters, with their distinct personalities and motivations, laid the groundwork for the events to come. Each of them, with their unique skills and perspectives, would play a crucial role in the journey to uncover the house's secrets and face the horrors that awaited. In the first few weeks after moving in, the Miller family was busy organizing the house and adjusting to their new environment. The mansion was large and full of history, but soon small signs began to appear that something wasn't right. One night, while James was reviewing historical documents in the study, he heard faint whispers that seemed to come from the walls. He thought it might be the wind or perhaps just his imagination, but the whispers continued, indistinct and persistent. He decided not to mention it to Emily, thinking he might just be tired. Emily, on the other hand, was organizing the kitchen when she noticed that some utensils she had meticulously placed had moved. At first, she thought Lily was playing around, but the girl denied any involvement. Emily began to feel a slight unease, as if she was constantly being watched, even when she was alone in a room. Lily, always adventurous, seemed the most at ease in the house. However, she began to frequently talk about a new friend she saw in her room. "He's nice, but sometimes he's sad," she would say innocently. James and Emily thought it was just another invention of their daughter's fertile imagination, but the frequency with which Lily mentioned the invisible friend began to worry them. One morning, James woke up with a strange feeling and saw that the wall clock in the master bedroom was showing the wrong time, something he was sure he had set the night before. Additionally, he found doors that had been left open completely closed, and vice versa. Emily also began to notice that pictures hanging on the walls were slightly crooked, even after she had adjusted them several times. One night, while they were watching television in the living room, they all clearly heard footsteps upstairs. James, trying to stay calm, went up to check but found nothing out of the ordinary. Even so, the feeling of being watched never left him. The strange events began to increase in frequency and intensity. Lights flickered for no apparent reason, and shadows seemed to move at the corners of their peripheral vision. Lily started waking up in the middle of the night, crying, saying her invisible friend was angry. The unease in the house was palpable, and James and Emily began to seriously worry. They decided it was time to seek explanations and help. Although both were rational and not easily convinced of supernatural phenomena, the events they were experiencing were hard to ignore. The first person that came to mind was Mr. Thompson, the local historian. James believed he could offer some explanation or at least guide them on what to do. Thus, the Miller family prepared to face a reality that defied logic and reason. They were just beginning to understand that the house they had chosen to be their home held much darker and deeper secrets than they could have imagined. As the weeks went by, the feeling of unease inside the Miller mansion grew. What were once occasional incidents now became daily occurrences, making it impossible for the family to ignore what was happening around them. One afternoon, while Emily was painting in the studio she had set up in the attic, she noticed the temperature in the room suddenly dropped, making the air frigid and causing her breath to turn into small clouds of vapor. She looked around for a logical explanation but found none. Suddenly, the brush was yanked from her hand by an invisible force and thrown against the wall, splattering paint everywhere. Frightened, Emily ran out of the attic, feeling a cold presence behind her. That same night, James was working in his study when the lights began to flicker violently. He looked at the switch, which seemed to be in order, but the lights continued to flicker. At one point, They went out completely, plunging the room into total darkness. When the lights came back on, James saw a shadow quickly pass through the study door, even though he was sure no one else was awake. He felt a chill run down his spine and decided it was time to have a serious conversation with Emily about the phenomena. Meanwhile, Lily began behaving more and more strangely. She started waking up frequently in the middle of the night, screaming and crying, saying her invisible friend was angry and wanted to hurt someone. One of those nights, James and Emily found Lily in the hallway, standing in front of a mirror, talking in a low voice. When they asked what she was doing, Lily simply replied that she was trying to calm her friend. The house's doors also began to act independently. It was common for them to lock themselves, leaving family members trapped in a room for several minutes before finally unlocking on their own. One morning, James tried to leave the bedroom, but the door wouldn't budge. He forced the handle with all his strength, but it seemed something on the other side was holding it. After a few minutes of struggle, the door finally opened with a snap, almost throwing James to the floor. The phenomena didn't stop there. Items left in one place were found in another, with no logical explanation. Objects disappeared for days and reappeared in impossible locations, like the attic or basement. Emily began finding her paintings scratched with nail marks, as if someone had deliberately ruined her work. The family's mental health began to deteriorate. James started having constant nightmares and sleepless nights, worried about Emily and Lily's well-being. Emily, in turn, felt increasingly vulnerable and anxious, fearing being alone in any part of the house. Lily became more introverted, spending long periods in silence and avoiding eye contact. Desperate, James decided to schedule a meeting with Mr. Thompson to discuss the recent discoveries and disturbing events. They needed answers, and more importantly, they needed a solution to what seemed to be an increasingly aggressive supernatural force within their home. Thus, the Miller family was on the verge of collapse, unaware that the escalation of phenomena was just the beginning of the true nightmare they were about to face. James and Emily knew they could no longer ignore the disturbing events haunting their house. The presence of Mr. Thompson, a respected local historian with a passion for paranormal phenomena, seemed to be their only hope for finding answers and possibly a solution. One rainy afternoon, James invited Mr. Thompson over for tea, hoping to discuss the occurrences and seek advice. Thompson arrived with a serious expression and a suitcase full of equipment he used for his paranormal investigations. He listened attentively as James and Emily detailed all the strange events they had witnessed since moving into the mansion. After hearing the accounts, Mr. Thompson frowned and said, "It's possible the house is haunted by disturbed spirits. This mansion's history is filled with tragedies and unresolved mysteries. I'll start a detailed investigation to try to understand what's happening." Thompson installed video cameras and audio recorders at strategic points around the house. He also brought motion sensors and temperature variation detectors, hoping to capture any paranormal activity. That night, he joined the family in observing the recordings and monitoring live signals. Later that night, as the family and Mr. Thompson watched the screens, something strange began to happen. The cameras captured a shadowy figure moving through the upstairs hallway. It wasn't an ordinary shadow, but a humanoid shape moving slowly, as if patrolling the house. Thompson adjusted the camera's focus, trying to get a clearer image, but the figure suddenly vanished. Reviewing the audio recordings, Thompson found indistinct whispers and a soft crying that seemed to come from multiple directions at once. Temperatures in some parts of the house dropped drastically, while in other areas, the variation was minimal. Thompson looked at James and Emily, his face reflecting concern. "In my work, I've seen things most people wouldn't believe," Thompson said. "But this house, there's something profoundly unsettling here. We need to investigate further." Thompson decided to spend the night in the mansion to continue his observations. In the middle of the night, he was awakened by a loud banging noise coming from the basement. With a flashlight in hand, he cautiously descended the stairs, with James and Emily close behind. When they reached the basement, they found one of the motion detectors on the floor, as if it had been thrown with force. Thompson picked up the detector and noticed scratch marks on the wall, as if something or someone had tried to escape. A chill ran down his spine. We need to investigate this house's history even further. There's something here that wants to be heard but also wants to be feared. In the following days, Thompson delved into historical archives and old records, searching for any clues that could explain the events. He discovered accounts from former residents who spoke of visions of a woman dressed in white and a child crying in the hallways. He also found records of inexplicable tragedies that occurred over the decades, all linked to the mansion. Meanwhile, the presence of the spirits in the house seemed to intensify, as if they were aware of the investigation. The tension within the Miller family grew, and they wondered if they would ever find peace in their own home. With the evidence collected and the dark history unearthed, Thompson was determined to find a way to help the Miller family deal with the supernatural presence haunting their home. He knew the answer wouldn't be simple, but he was willing to face the challenge, no matter how terrifying it might be. From that moment on, Thompson's investigation would become deeper and more dangerous, as he and the Miller family prepared to confront the dark secrets the mansion held. After delving deeply into historical archives and old records, Mr. Thompson made disturbing discoveries about the Miller family's mansion. He began sharing these dark revelations with James and Emily, hoping to shed light on the phenomena they were experiencing. First, we need to go back in time, even before the house was built, Thompson began, spreading maps and old documents across the dining room table. This land was originally a sacred cemetery for the local indigenous tribe. When the settlers arrived, they disrespected these sacred grounds, building over them without any regard for the dead. James and Emily listened intently, absorbing every detail. And it's not just that, Thompson continued. The mansion's first owners, the Whitmore family, were known for their occult practices. Harold Whitmore and his wife Margaret were involved in dark rituals, trying to contact the beyond and gain forbidden power and knowledge. Thompson revealed an old diary he had found in the city archives. This diary belonged to Margaret Whitmore. Here, she describes the rituals they performed in the house. They believed that by conducting these rituals, they could achieve immortality and control supernatural forces. What they didn't know was that they were awakening something much more dangerous. The diary contained macabre details of sacrifices and invocations. Margaret mentioned the presence of a powerful entity they called the Guardian, which began to manifest after a particularly dark ritual. It was after this ritual that Margaret was found dead under mysterious circumstances, Thompson explained. And shortly after, their son disappeared. As Thompson investigated further, he found police records of several child disappearances in the area, all occurring near the mansion. These disappearances were never solved, he said. The children simply vanished without a trace. The investigations always ended at the same point, the Whitmore mansion. Emily turned pale upon hearing this. Are you saying the spirits of these children might be haunting our house? It's possible, Thompson replied. The disturbed souls of the missing children, along with the Whitmore's profane practices, could have created a vortex of negative energy in the mansion. This would explain the paranormal phenomena you've been experiencing. James was visibly shaken. So, what can we do? How can we rid our house of this curse? Thompson took a deep breath. We need to perform a purification ritual to appease the spirits and, hopefully, send this entity back to where it came from. But it won't be easy. We need preparation and mental strength to face whatever might appear. The Miller family agreed to follow Mr. Thompson's plan, despite their growing fear. They were determined to reclaim the peace and safety of their home, even if it meant confronting the unknown terrors the mansion held. With the dark discoveries of the past, the next phase would be preparing for the final confrontation with the supernatural forces haunting the mansion. Mr. Thompson knew he would need all his experience and courage to lead the family through this ritual, and the Miller family prepared for the challenge, united by the hope of finally freeing their home from the dark past that imprisoned it. Nights at the Miller mansion became increasingly terrifying as the paranormal phenomena intensified. the presence of the spirits felt more palpable, affecting each family member in frightening and personal ways. Emily was the first to have a direct experience. One night, as she was getting ready for bed, she heard soft crying coming from the hallway. Initially, she thought it was Lily, but as she approached the sound, she found herself face to face with the figure of a woman dressed in white. The woman seemed to float slightly above the ground, her face distorted by pain and sorrow. Emily was paralyzed with fear as the figure slowly disappeared into thin air, leaving behind an echo of despair that reverberated through the walls of the house. James, on the other hand, began to be tormented by recurring nightmares. In his dreams, he found himself trapped in the labyrinthine hallways of the mansion, always pursued by faceless shadows that whispered his name with icy voices. These nightmares left him exhausted and shaken, as they felt incredibly real. Each night, the pursuit became more intense, and James would wake up in a cold sweat, feeling that the shadows were getting closer to catching him. Lily, the couple's daughter, seemed to be in an even worse situation. Several times, Emily and James found her talking alone in her room, speaking with her invisible friend. Lily's behavior became increasingly strange and worrying. One night, James found her at the top of the stairs, about to jump. When he grabbed her and asked what she was doing, Lily responded with an eerily calm tone. "My friend said it would be fun to fly." Worried about Lily's safety, James and Emily decided to keep constant watch over her. However, the influence of the invisible friend seemed to grow. Lily drew dark figures and wrote words she didn't understand, but which sent chills down her parents' spines. The house was turning the family's life into a true nightmare, and they felt they were losing control of the situation. Mr. Thompson continued his investigations and tried to protect the family with various amulets and minor rituals. He explained that the presence of disturbed spirits was manifesting in increasingly aggressive and personal ways, feeding off each person's fear and vulnerability. "We need to confront these entities head-on," Thompson said during a nighttime meeting with the family. "They're trying to communicate something, but they're also trapped in a cycle of pain and anger. Our challenge will be to understand this communication and free them before they can do more harm to you." James and Emily, despite their fear, were determined to follow Thompson's guidance. They knew time was running out and they needed to act quickly to save not only their sanity but also their daughter's life. As they prepared for the purification ritual, the Miller family faced a daily struggle against the spirits and their manifestations. Emily avoided walking through the hallways alone. James feared sleeping and being pursued in his dreams again, and Lily was increasingly influenced by her invisible friend. Each direct experience with the entities increased the family's sense of despair, but also strengthened their determination to end the curse hanging over the mansion. They knew the road ahead would be dangerous and uncertain, but they were ready to face the horrors of the past in hopes of freeing the house and finding peace again. With Mr. Thompson by their side, the Millers prepared for the final confrontation, aware that every step could be crucial in the battle against the supernatural forces threatening to destroy them. Determined to gather more evidence and understand the extent of the paranormal phenomena at the Miller mansion, Mr. Thompson decided to intensify his investigation. He brought in state-of-the-art recording equipment, including night vision. The Miller family agreed to follow Thompson's plan. They knew that confronting the entities directly would be dangerous, but also the only way to reclaim their home and lives. Mr. Thompson began preparing the ritual, gathering the necessary materials and instructing the family on what they needed to do. With a thorough investigation revealing the true nature of the paranormal phenomena, the Miller family prepared to face the spirits haunting their house. Each of them knew the battle would be difficult, but they were determined to fight for their peace and sanity. The final confrontation was approaching, and with Mr. Thompson's support, the family was ready to face the horrors awaiting them in the mansion's darkness. Tension in the Miller house had been increasing daily, and the feeling of a malevolent presence had become unbearable. Mr. Thompson was finalizing the preparations for the purification ritual when, on a particularly cold and windy night, the paranormal activity reached its peak. It all started with a sudden blackout. The house lights flickered violently before going out completely, plunging the mansion into darkness. James tried to turn on the flashlight, but it seemed the batteries had been drained of energy. "Stay together," he ordered, trying to keep his voice calm. Suddenly, a deafening noise echoed through the house. The doors began slamming shut with force, one after another, as if an invisible force was opening and closing them repeatedly. Emily screamed as a window upstairs shattered, scattering glass all over the floor. The entire house seemed to vibrate with chaotic, negative energy. "Everyone to the living room!" shouted Thompson, trying to gather the family in a place where they could protect themselves and better observe the phenomena. As they ran through the dark corridors, James felt something grab his ankle, nearly tripping him. He broke free with difficulty, feeling a chill run up his spine. "We're not alone here," he said, panting. Upon reaching the living room, they heard a piercing scream from Lily, who was with Emily. "Lily, where are you?" Emily shouted, but there was no response. The house seemed alive with noises and movements. Mr. Thompson tried in vain to calm the situation, but the presence in the house was beyond anything he had ever faced. "They're trying to separate us," he said, trying to sound firm. "We need to stay focused and calm." Suddenly, an invisible force hit James, throwing him against the wall hard enough to leave him dazed. Emily ran to him but was repelled by an energy that seemed to emanate from the very air. "Lily!" Emily shouted again, desperate. "Where is our daughter?" It was then that Mr. Thompson realized the invisible force was centered on something or someone. He ran down the hallway, following an innate instinct, and descended the stairs to the basement, where the feeling of cold and despair was strongest. In the basement, by the faint light of a candle Thompson held, he found Lily. The girl was in a corner, hugging her knees, her eyes glazed over, and her body trembling. "Lily," he called softly, trying not to scare her any further. "I'm here to help you." Lily looked at him, and Thompson saw that she was in a state of shock. "My friend, he's angry," she whispered before fainting in Thompson's arms. He carried her back to the living room, where Emily and James received her with tears of relief and concern. "We need to finish this now," Thompson said, his voice firm. "The entities are feeding off our fear. Let's perform the purification ritual immediately." The family, still in shock, helped Thompson prepare the protective circle in the center of the living room. They lit candles, placed salt around the circle, and began reciting the prayers and chants Thompson had prepared. As the ritual progressed, the atmosphere in the house began to change. The door slamming lessened, the shadows retreated, and the air seemed to warm slightly. However, the resistance of the entities was palpable, and the effort required everyone's concentration and willpower. After hours that felt like an eternity, the ritual reached its climax. A bright light filled the room, and a scream of despair echoed through the house, followed by a deep, heavy silence. The entities had finally been appeased. Lily, still weak, slowly opened her eyes and smiled at her parents. "He's gone," she whispered. "My friend is gone." James and Emily hugged their daughter tightly, tears of relief and gratitude streaming down their faces. Mr. Thompson, exhausted, nodded with satisfaction. "We did it," he said. "But there's still work to be done to ensure this house remains at peace." The Miller house, now silent, seemed to have finally found a moment of tranquility. The path to recovery and peace would still be long, but with Thompson's support and the family's strength, they were ready to rebuild their lives and their home, free from the shadows of the past. With the intensification of paranormal events and the recent rescue of Lily from the basement, the Miller family was more determined than ever to end the torment haunting their house. Under Mr. Thompson's guidance, they prepared to conduct a spiritual cleansing ritual, hoping to finally banish the disturbed entities. Mr. Thompson explained that the ritual would require the participation of all family members, as well as a series of specific preparations. They started by physically cleaning and purifying the house, removing any objects that might be linked to the spirits. This included some old items left by previous owners, which could have been used in dark rituals. On the day of the ritual, Thompson brought a variety of herbs, incense, and protective crystals. They began by lighting white candles in every room of the house, symbolizing light and purity. Mr. Thompson then drew a circle of salt around the family in the living room, creating a safe space for the ritual. "Intention is crucial," Thompson said, his voice calm and firm. "You must believe in the cleansing and the expulsion of these negative energies. Visualize peace and light filling every corner of this house." James, Emily, and Lily joined hands, with Thompson in the center leading the invocation. They began reciting chants of protection and purification, while burning sage and myrrh incense, known for their spiritual cleansing properties. As the chants intensified, the house seemed to vibrate with a new and powerful energy. For James and Emily, the ritual brought a sense of calm and hope. The shadows seemed to dissipate, and the air, once heavy, now felt lighter. Lily, still recovering from the trauma, felt a sense of warmth and protection around her, as if the house was finally starting to heal. When the ritual reached its climax, Mr. Thompson sprinkled holy water in every corner of the room, declaring the house free of all malevolent presences. "Disturbed spirits, leave this dwelling and find peace," he proclaimed, while the family repeated his words. At first, everything indicated that the ritual had been successful. The house was quiet, and for the first time in months, the Millers were able to sleep through the night without interruptions. The doors remained closed, the lights didn't flicker, and the unsettling shadows no longer roamed the corridors. However, despite the initial success, an uneasy feeling lingered. James, Emily, and Lily couldn't shake the sense that something was still present, something that resisted leaving the house completely. Thompson also noticed the persistent aura of unease and warned the family to remain vigilant. "Sometimes, spirits can hide, waiting for an opportunity to return," he explained. "If you notice any sign of their return, inform me immediately." In the following days, the family tried to return to normalcy. James went back to work, Emily resumed her painting, and Lily slowly started to feel more like a child again. But the feeling that something was lurking never completely left them. One night, while Emily was finishing a new painting, she felt a cold breeze pass through the studio, something that hadn't happened since the ritual. Instinctively, she looked toward the corner of the room, where she saw a fleeting shadow. "No," she whispered to herself, trying to convince herself it was just her imagination. James also had a disturbing experience. While reviewing some documents in the study, he felt a presence behind him. Turning quickly, he saw nothing, but the feeling of being watched was unmistakable. With these small signs reappearing, the family began to worry again. They decided to keep Mr. Thompson informed of any new activity, aware that the battle against the disturbed spirits might not be completely over. Although the spiritual cleansing ritual brought a temporary calm, the Miller family knew that the true confrontation with the entities might still lie ahead. Determined to protect their home and sanity, they continued to fight, guided by Mr. Thompson's knowledge and support. The path ahead remained uncertain, but together, they were ready to face any challenge that came their way, hoping to finally find peace and free the house from the horrors of the past. Despite the initial success of the spiritual cleansing ritual, the Miller family couldn't completely shake the feeling of unease that hung over the house. Although the paranormal activity had significantly decreased, small signs persisted, constantly reminding them of what they had faced. One morning, while having breakfast, James and Emily discussed the future. "We need to consider the possibility of moving," James suggested hesitantly. "The house seems quieter, but we can't continue living with this constant fear." Emily agreed, albeit reluctantly. "We've invested so much time and effort here, but our safety and Lily's are more important. Maybe it's time to move on." Lily, listening to the conversation, didn't protest. Despite loving the house for its beauty and mystery, she also felt the weight of what had happened. "I just want all of us to be happy and safe," she said, with a maturity surprising for her age. With the decision made, the family began making plans to move. They informed Mr. Thompson, who understood and supported the decision. "You did what you could," he said. Sometimes, certain places simply aren't meant to be inhabited. If you need my help with anything, I'll be around. News of the Millers' move spread quickly through the small town of Ashwood. The residents, already aware of the mansion's legends and stories, became even more convinced that the place was cursed. Few dared to pass by Elm Street, and even fewer considered the possibility of buying the house. In the following days, James and Emily organized the move. It was painful to leave behind what they had dreamed would be their perfect home, but the family's safety and well-being were priorities. As they packed their things, small incidents continued to occur. Soft whispers, fleeting shadows, and doors closing on their own. It was as if the house was aware they were leaving. On moving day, the family bid farewell to Mr. Thompson, who promised to continue investigating the mansion's history and seek a definitive solution to the supernatural presence. "You are always welcome to visit," he said. "And who knows, maybe one day this house will truly find peace." The Millers left Ashwood with a mix of relief and sadness. They moved to a new home in a nearby city, a more modern place free of any haunted history. Slowly, they began to rebuild their lives, trying to leave behind the horrors they had faced. The mansion on Elm Street was left abandoned. Its imposing facade, now weathered by time and neglect, served as a grim reminder of the events that had occurred within its walls. The town's residents avoided the house, considering it a place of ill omen. A few months after the move, James, Emily, and Lily returned briefly to Ashwood to visit friends. During the visit, they drove by their old mansion. They stopped the car for a moment, looking at the house they once called home. "It's sad to see it like this now," said Emily, holding James's hand. "Yes, but we made the right choice," James replied. "We are happier and safer where we are now." Lily, from the back seat, looked at the house one last time. "I hope the spirits find peace someday," she said with a quiet wisdom. With that, the family said their final goodbye to the mansion. They returned to their new life, determined to create new memories and leave the past behind. However, the mansion on Elm Street remained a dark enigma, a haunted house that would continue to fascinate and terrify Ashwood's residents for generations. As the Miller family moved on, Mr. Thompson persisted in his search for answers. He believed that one day he could fully unravel the mansion's mysteries and finally free the troubled souls residing there. Until then, the house stood as a silent monument to the unknown, patiently awaiting the day it could finally rest in peace. Years passed since the Miller family left the mansion on Elm Street. Life moved on, and they found peace and happiness in their new home. However, the terrifying experiences they had in Ashwood left deep marks on their lives. James and Emily often reflected on what they had been through. "We faced something most people would consider impossible to believe," James said one evening as they sat on their porch. "But it made us stronger and brought us closer together as a family." Emily agreed, holding James's hand. "Yes, we learned a lot about ourselves and about the world beyond what we can see. And most importantly, we survived. We will always have those memories, but they taught us to cherish every moment of peace we have now." Lily, now an adult, also reflected on her childhood in the mansion. Despite having moved away many years ago, the memories still occasionally haunted her. She had recurring nightmares, in which she relived the most terrifying moments. "Sometimes, I still see that invisible friend in my dreams," she admitted during a conversation with her parents. "But I'm learning to cope with it. I'm trying to turn those experiences into something positive." Determined to overcome her trauma, Lily decided to study psychology, specializing in childhood trauma. She wanted to help other children who had gone through difficult situations. "If I can help someone overcome their fears and traumas, then everything I went through will have been worth it," she said, with a quiet determination. Meanwhile, Mr. Thompson continued his investigations into the mansion. He compiled all the data and evidence he had collected, including the Miller family's accounts, into a book titled The Haunted Mansion of Ashwood, a Paranormal Investigation. The book detailed the stories of past tragedies, the Whitmore family's dark rituals, and the Millers' disturbing experiences. Thompson's book became a success, attracting both skeptics and believers. Many readers were fascinated by the detailed accounts and the presented evidence, while others questioned the event's veracity. Nonetheless, the book sparked new interest in the mansion, turning it into a pilgrimage site for ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts. "I hope my work helps bring some peace to the souls that might still be trapped in that house," Thompson wrote in the book's introduction, "and that it serves as a warning about the dangers of disrespecting the boundaries between the world of the living and the dead." James and Emily were proud to see the positive impact of Thompson's work. They believed that by sharing their stories, they were contributing to a better understanding of the unknown. "The truth needs to be told, even if it's hard to believe," said James. "I hope our story helps others find the courage to face their own fears." Although the mansion on Elm Street continued to be a place of mystery and haunting, the Miller family found a way to move forward. They learned to value life and face their fears with courage and resilience. And over time, the scars of the past began to heal, leaving behind a story of overcoming and hope. Lily, now a respected psychologist, used her experiences to help others heal their own wounds. James and Emily, enjoying the tranquility of their new life, continued to support their daughter in her journey. And Mr. Thompson, with his book, perpetuated the memory of the events, ensuring that the truth would never be forgotten. Thus, the story of the Miller family and the mansion on Elm Street became an urban legend, a reminder of the horrors that can lurk in the most unexpected places, but also a testament to the power of courage and the human spirit.